Well, I suppose hopefully my talk both complements and contrasts with Petter's, and actually maybe that last question is something to pick up on, that we're all insiders in this debate. Yes, if you focus on militarisation as being the underlying cause of conflict, but what if you focus on poverty and inequality in a country entirely different from your own one? You're an outsider then. Can you do anything about that? Should the health sector have any role in these much bigger economic issues? Can it? These are the kinds of themes that I want to address in this course. I mean, I found Peter's talk shocking. The shocking rise in military expenditure is terrible. I mean, for those of us around and campaigning in the 1990s when we thought we were going to get the peace dividend, to see this exponential rise is quite incredible. But, as I say, I want to concentrate on, not on money, but on processes. And largely in this talk, economic processes, which is why I've subtitled the talk Greed, Grievance and Groups. And the greed and the grievance are the economic processes, and I'm going to go a bit beyond the economics with the groups towards the end. Now, I work at the UCL Institute for Global Health. I suppose my previous set of engagements with these issues on armed conflict was as director of a charity, a health charity, concerned with conflict. We produced, for example, health impact assessments of the war on Iraq. I would say we were insiders there because we were campaigning against the British government a lot of the time in its activities in Iraq. It was always intriguing to us how you would address these deeper causes of conflict, and I don't think we ever found a way of doing it. So you have a challenge, actually, I think, ahead of you in these groups. Very briefly, I want to analyse some competing frameworks for understanding and analysing the underlying causes of war. And I think this is where the problem lies, actually. There are so many ways of looking at this problem. We can't actually be strategic about how to address it. And there's a lot of, thank you, there's a lot of uncertainty over how we should even acquire knowledge of what are the underlying causes of war. There's debates within the categories, the major categories we use to analyse war: political approaches, economic approaches, social approaches, psychological approaches. And then there's debates about whether the health sector can be involved in addressing them. So there's large-scale uncertainty at every level in this debate. Okay? So, when you look at the top, I suppose you've got some of the major categories through which we address the underlying causes of conflict. The arms trade, we've already heard that being a motor of conflict. Psychological issues, colonialism, historical ones. Social, political, ethnicity is obviously a huge issue. I'm going to concentrate on the economic ones, and they're all clustered towards the bottom here. And you can see immediately that there's competing understandings from an economic perspective of what causes conflict. Does poverty cause conflict? Or does economic growth, its opposite, cause conflict? Does an increase in inequalities between groups cause conflict? Or could a diminution of inequalities cause conflict? It's complex. Hanlon, in a textbook on civil war, gives a very nice set of three competing, contrasting explanations for civil war, where he looks at older influences on war compared with more contemporary reasons for war, insiders and outsiders theme coming up again, internal and external, the impact of international pressures on the likelihood of war versus the impact of domestic politics, for example. And then another axis, and maybe this relates to the grievance and greed debates, the big bad men, the manipulators who lead conflicts, often in the name of economic acquisition? Or is conflict really about people under pressure who are struggling to gain control over the minimum resources they need to survive? So these are, I just wanted to present a couple of quick frameworks which are, are all in some way, rather contradictory. I don't have time to go into all of the different competing elements and understandings. For example, within the political category, does democracy cause, a transition to democracy cause conflict, or is it authoritarian rule? But you can see through the unpacking of just the economic category how many different competing frameworks there instantly are for understanding why conflict happens. Are you all with me? I'm confused. Okay. And then there's the question of, well, how do we know what we know about the underlying causes of conflict? Firstly, you could gather huge sets of data on inequality in different countries, for example, or rates of poverty, and then see whether there's more conflict in countries with higher inequality and so on. And that's done by many researchers, many political scientists and economists. But data for the key variables is often poor, and there's often basic, and in this area it's very important, basic disputes about basic terms like what is a war? What constitutes a war? So this produces often spurious associations, and I'll show you that with inequality in a minute. And you can do, of course, the opposite, which is detailed case studies of conflict in particular countries. But that, of course, lacks the potential power of a cross-country approach which looks at associations. So there's all kinds of issues around what we think causes conflicts. Do we really know? Yeah? So, putting all those issues to the back of your mind, I wanted to concentrate on poverty and inequality as causes of conflict and unpack those ideas a little more. So the first idea is that it seems to be the case that countries with very low per capita incomes are more predisposed to conflict. And in fact, if you looked at some of the poorest countries in the world, the bottom 10 poorest countries, you'd find the majority of them were in conflict. And there may be good reasons for that. Long-term deprivation reduces the likelihood of redistribution, leads to dog-eat-dog behaviour. It may provoke elites to seize the resources of poorer groups violently because they can. And it may also reduce the willingness and ability, the capacity of the state to redistribute and to provide public goods like health services. So you could see that there are pretty good reasons why long-term economic deprivation might cause conflict.